I'm Becky Ravenkamp. I'm the Creek Watershed Coordinator. I work out of the NRD in Hardington. I've been there for about 1.5 years. I actually live in Verdigris, and we've been there about 4.5 years. And my husband and I moved from Colorado, where we did regenerative agriculture with a never-till diversified continuous crop farm out there. And while we were in Colorado, I farmed and ranched with my husband, and then I actually coordinated conservation conferences, workshops, and field days to help farmers learn about some of the practices. So now we're going to talk about some fun stuff. Ecosystem processes and soil health principles and how that impacts natural nutrient management. All right, so ecosystem processes, water cycle, nutrient cycle, energy flow, and community dynamics or biological communities. So what is soil health? The continued capacity of the soil to function as a vital living ecosystem that sustains plants, animals, and humans. So the soil health principles are keep the soil covered, minimize disturbance, increase diversity, increase living root days, and integrate livestock. Okay, so there's one indicator that is pretty easy to see, even if you're just driving down the road, that will tell you whether or not that soil is healthy and whether or not those ecosystem processes are functioning optimally in that field. And that is bare soil. Okay, so when it comes to the water cycle, if you have bare soil out there, that water that hits either from rain or from irrigation lands on bare soil. The impact of that raindrop can dislodge soil particles. And once they're dislodged, they can be blown and washed away with water. Okay, and as they roll through that field, they dislodge other soil particles, and pretty soon you just have a muddy river coming out of your field, taking your topsoil with it. So here's a pretty good picture that could be anywhere in any country across the world. So to help with that, we want to keep that soil covered. So as that raindrop is falling, not only is it eroding the soil, it's also compacting it and sealing it off, keeping what water does hit the soil and not run off from infiltrating. So that increases your water erosion. So if we can keep it covered with either living plants or dead plant residues, it's actually a cushion for that soil that will intercept the energy from that raindrop, keep it from dislodging the soil underneath because it can't even get to it. Those water particles will cling to either the live plants or the residue, and it will give it an opportunity to slow down and actually percolate into the soil profile where it can be stored and used for your crops. On bare soil, we experience evaporation, that water just seeping out of the soil into the atmosphere. If you have live plants, anything going through the plant is transpiration. We want to convert that evaporation into transpiration anytime we can. There's studies that from UNL and KSU that show that we can increase the water use efficiency 30 to 50% by keeping it covered. Okay, how much good would an extra 2 to 5 inches of rain do in your field every summer? Okay, it could be the difference between a bumper crop and a crop failure. So energy flow is how the energy flows through the ecosystem, and food webs are really driven by energy. In this particular example, you've got the sun here. The primary producers are those plants. They can take that sun's energy and produce their own food for it. Then somebody else comes and grazes on them. They take that energy and it goes into the next trophic level. On bare soil, we have no photosynthesis. Okay, we are not capturing that soil energy and creating food with it. Solar radiation hits that bare soil, bounces off, increasing temperatures. Bare soil can be up to 160 degrees on a hot sunny day. Soil microbes quit functioning at 160 degrees. If we cover it with plant residues and living plants, we now have photosynthesis going on. We're harnessing that energy. We're protecting the soil surface. from that radiation, decreasing the temperatures to the 80 to 90-degree temperature that soil microbes prefer. The simple nutrient cycle says that seed goes in the ground, uses the nutrients that are there, grows, dies, starts to decompose, and puts those nutrients in the ground, right? So in our ag systems, we spend a lot of money to put inputs, fertilizers right here, those nutrients that the plants are needing to grow. And natural nutrient cycling, it looks something kind of crazy like this. It's actually driven by the biology in the soil. We can increase the efficiency of our natural nutrient cycling by making sure that we decrease the disturbance so that our little microbes, our livestock underground, have shelter, food, and air in the soil. Okay, every time we go through with mechanical tillage, it can destroy the aggregates that these little guys use as habitat. We can increase diversity. Increasing diversity in our plants increases the diversity of the exudates that the plants pump out through their roots, and also increases the diversity of the residue that's going to be left after those plants are harvested or whatever. So we're going to dive into this a little bit. It's not going to solve all of the farmers' problems this year with expensive fertilizer. It might be too late this year, but if we start planning and start working towards that, maybe we can cut down on some of the expensive fertilizers. Maybe we can increase our efficiency that Jeff has achieved in his farms, and just start thinking about how we can use our input dollars more efficiently. So some of the main players in this nutrient cycling are bacteria, okay, the single-celled organisms. They're going to be the most numerous in the soil because they're really small. Once they eat things in the soil and they secrete it back out, it actually raises the pH in the soil, and they provide nitrate to the soil. Their carbon to nitrogen ratio is 5:1. Fungi actually lowers pH, provide ammonium. They're more numerous in the soil than bacteria, but less so than the bigger ones like the protozoa, the nematodes, and the earthworms. And the fungi carbon to nitrogen ratio is 10:1. Okay, so we're probably all familiar with the bacteria that associates with legumes to fix atmospheric nitrogen. Some of the numbers talk about needing 50 to 100 nodules on a soybean plant. And if you see that within 10 weeks, you know that it's produced enough nitrogen to take care of all of the needs of the plants. Okay. A lot of times, if you're using legumes, we'll use an inoculant with it to increase that nodulation. Mark Wallace is a farmer out in Alliance, Nebraska, which is out in the Panhandle. He's done a lot of work with peas, as has Jeff. And he gives himself 30 to 45 pounds of nitrogen credit per acre if his peas produce 30 pounds. So if he's harvesting 30 bushel peas, then he can give himself a 30 to 45 pound nitrogen credit when the pea residue breaks down and when the roots break down. UNL says that you can take a 45 pound credit if you don't have sandy soils, if your soybeans produce 30 bushels or more. If you're on sandy soil, they recommend 25 pounds of nitrogen credits. So if producers aren't taking those nitrogen credits for their soybeans in their rotation, this would probably be a great year to start doing that. But what a lot of people don't know is that there are bacteria that associate with grass plants, which would be the corn in a lot of the rotations around here. The thing is, we've got to make sure that the environment is conducive for these bacteria to live. And if they're not there, we can inoculate the soils with them. And inoculants are pretty cheap. So fungi are another group of pretty cool players in here. With the fungi, you either have this arbuscular mycorrhizal fungi or this ectomycorrhiza fungi. So the arbuscular mycorrhizal fungi actually goes into the roots and into the cells of the plant and create these little, they kind of look like trees under the microscope. The ecto associate along the outside of the root and then in between the cells in the plant roots. Think about plants, they are put in that soil. They cannot move. They can only reach what is around them. If I'm thirsty and I need a bottle of water and I'm a plant and the water's over there on the counter, I can't reach it. Okay, but if all of my little friends that are sitting in the chairs rearrange themselves, they could hand me that water bottle. I wouldn't have to go anywhere and I can still access something that I can't reach myself. And that's what happens in the soil. So when you put that seed in there, it grows up. It's going to use all of the nutrients and the water that it can around that root zone. Okay, it's going to grow out, and if it encounters nutrients or water, it can take it up. But what happens when it's already exhausted everything that it can reach? It's going to suffer if it doesn't have some friends that can go out there and help it reach the rest of the nutrients in your soil. So the fungi join together and create a hyphal network and can go out into the soil farther than the root hairs of the plants. Okay, and it allows them to, get nutrients that they wouldn't otherwise be able to reach. When they associate with these fungi, it also increases their immune system. Okay, helps protect them from other things in the soil. Also helps protect them from diseases on top of the soil. They will not create these symbiotic relationships with fungi if there is an abundant levels of nutrients around their soils, around their roots. So when they're out there being able to take everything up, they don't need any friends, because in order for you to give me the water, I have to give you something in return. So the roots will put out exudates and signal to the microbes when they need them to come in and help them. They will only do that when they get to the point where they need the microbes to help them, because they have to pay the microbes back. Okay, it's that symbiotic relationship. They both get something in return. The really cool thing is that when the plant determines that it can no longer afford to continue to feed the microbes in the soil, it quits doing it. Okay, it'll send those carbs and that protein up to the seed. And when that happens, the microbes can die, and the microbes that are right along the root or inside that plant root can be absorbed by the plant. That's some crazy science right there. Okay, plants harvesting the microbes. And then we turn around and the microbes harvest the plants. We talked about the fungi and the bacteria having a carbon and nitrogen ratio in their little bodies. They need to be able to maintain that. So the average is an 8-to-1 ratio of carbon to nitrogen. They have 8 carbon molecules and 1 nitrogen molecule in their little bodies. In order to just maintain their bodies and then be able to eat and metabolize and everything else, they need another 16 units of carbon. Their ideal diet is a 24-to-1 ratio, carbon to nitrogen. Up here, we can see that rice straw is an 82-to-1 carbon to nitrogen ratio. Okay, have you guys had chemistry? Have you taken chemistry? No? Okay. Well, you're in luck, because sometimes me and numbers are not friends. So I've already done the math. So it's going to take 4 parts of nitrogen to break down that rice straw. Those microbes have to get it somewhere. They're going to take it from the soil, and it's going to take them a long time to chew through that rice straw. Okay, so that nitrogen they take into their little bodies as they're chewing through this carbon, and they're not giving it back into the soil. Okay, it's tied up in their little bodies. So a lot of times when we plant a rye cover crop that goes to vegetative state, people will talk about having a nitrogen deficiency in the soil after that rye. That's because the little microbes have taken it all so that they can eat the straw. If we get down here to the rye and the vegetative state, it's a lot closer to that ideal diet. And so those little microbes can eat that vegetative rye, not have to take up all the nitrogen, and can do it really quickly to make the carbon and the nitrogen available to the next crop pretty quickly, probably within that growing season. So again, if we took rye up here, which some people take rye and they'll either put hairy vetch or a pea or some other legume in there, you can actually bring the total carbon to nitrogen ratio of that mix down. So again, diversity is important. Now on the flip side of that, if we put in beef manure, and I'm sure Leslie's probably going to talk about this, it has a 7-to-1 carbon to nitrogen ratio. So it doesn't have enough carbon in that diet to satisfy the microbes. So it has to go get that carbon somewhere. Soybean stubble is a 12-to-1, and urea, which is a fertilizer, as a nitrogen source, is less than 1-to-1. Okay, so for the microbes to be able to kind of process that, they really have to go find some carbon. But what happens when they have to go find that carbon? Where are they going to find it at? Well, they're going to find it in the soil. So if you don't have that residue and you don't have those roots in the system that can provide the carbon for them, they're going to go find it. They're going to start going after your soil organic matter, which can be up to 58% carbon. And in your soil organic matter, it's going to be the glues that the bacteria and the fungi have used to stick your soil together and make aggregates. Okay, the aggregates are going to be like little rocks in there. Okay, think about filling a jar full of rocks. You're going to have all kinds of pockets in there. Those pockets are important for water infiltration, for the air and the water to exchange. You need that air in there. If there's no air, the microbes can't fix the nitrogen out of it. So they're going to start eating the glues that hold that soil together. And when the glues are gone, that soil will collapse. Your air pockets are lost. The air can't get in there. The water can't infiltrate. You're going to have less water for your crops to use. The moral of the story is carbon is king. And we need to start including carbon in our nutrient management plans so that we can keep this ecosystem in the soil healthy. So we need to always keep it covered, providing that plant residue and those living plants. We need to minimize disturbance. Okay, a lot of our tillage will break down those aggregates. We need to increase the diversity so that we can balance those carbon and nitrogen ratios, foster those symbiotic relationships by increasing those living root days. If you do the math, in our current system of corn and soybeans, we are only harvesting the sun's energy 33% of the time, which means 66% of the time our soil is not working for us to make the bank payment. And we probably spend a lot of money during that other 6% time of the year to keep it from working for us. And then integrate livestock. Not only can they do some really good things by just helping to cycle those nutrients on site, but they also bring some diversity in through their saliva. Now, if you don't have livestock that you can integrate, you can bring in some manures, bring in some compost to help some of that microbial life. So what we really want to do is increase that ecosystem functioning, improve the soil health and water quality so that we can improve farm profitability and keep farmers and ranchers who want to stay on the land on the land.